Welcome to Beneath the Bible, where we're helping you dig deeper and uncover the world beneath the sacred book. In this series, we're looking at ancient Near Eastern iconography, the images used by ancient Near Eastern peoples, and the symbolism behind them. We'll look at various motifs used in ancient Near Eastern iconography, and how they may be at play in certain places in the biblical text. That's not to say these particular images were in mind when these texts were written, just that it's possible these kinds of images were known and may help us understand the conceptual world of the biblical writers. Today, we're going to explore serpent imagery in the ancient Near East. This is part one of a two-part look at this topic. In this video, we'll look at some of the negative dimensions of serpent imagery, and in part two, we'll look at the positive dimensions. Now, let's look at the negative dimensions of serpent imagery in the ancient Near East. In the ancient world, various elements of the natural world were often associated with elements of the supernatural world, or with elements of human life. Human emotions and characteristics were imparted to various natural beings and phenomena. The lion could be associated with the king, as a powerful and majestic creature like the king was believed to be. Thunder and lightning could be associated with the voice of the storm god. We see these same kinds of associations when we look at the snake imagery in the ancient Near East.
Snakes were part of everyday life in the ancient world. There are several species of snakes that live in the Near East, and these include both venomous and non-venomous snakes, but the venomous ones were of particular interest to the ancient people. They're most prominently featured in ancient Near Eastern art and literature. One important example comes from a text called the Brooklyn Papyrus. This lists dozens of snake species. And the Brooklyn Papyrus dates to around 300 BC, but it is probably copied from texts dating back to the Old Kingdom of Egypt, around 2200 BC. So you can see that humans have been fascinated by snakes for millennia. To this list, we can add a number of other types of snakes, some of which can probably be identified in the Bible. One example is the Levantine viper, sometimes called the death snake, which may be behind the text of Psalm 58:5.
With snakes being so common, powerful, and mysterious, it's not surprising to find them associated with the supernatural world. In the ancient Near East, these associations often came from how humans observed and interacted with snakes. Snakes came to be associated with a multitude of meanings, and we'll explore a few of them today. But first, we'll look at some examples of how snakes are depicted in the ancient world.
Humans in the ancient world had close interactions with snakes. Snake charming is an attested practice in the ancient world, and the skill of handling venomous snakes was thought of as almost magical. Ancient people knew snakes well enough to use distinctive features of different snakes in their art. One example is the Mesopotamian monster Mushushu, which is a hybrid creature with snake-like features, including horns over its eyes. And this is a feature of the Arabian horned viper, which has elongated scales over its eyes, giving it the appearance of having horns.
In Near Eastern art, snakes are depicted in a variety of contexts. First, snakes can simply appear as decoration, like on these ceramic vessels. One has a handle fashioned like a serpent, and the other has a snake winding over the surface of the jug. Snakes also frequently appear on seals, often from Mesopotamia or areas influenced by Mesopotamia. They may appear alone or as one component among many others, like this seal where snakes appear alongside wild goats and hybrid creatures. A common scene in ancient Near Eastern art is that of a warrior god defending a sacred tree from an attacking snake-like creature. This snake can be identified as a chaos dragon or chaos monster, not a normal serpent. We'll talk more about this serpentine creature later, but for now, we'll see that this scene leads us into the first attribute of snakes that we see in the Bible: chaos and disorder.
Serpents and serpent-like creatures also play a prominent role in the creation myths of the ancient Near East as agents of chaos. We see echoes of this history in Genesis, as well as other places in the Bible that we'll talk about shortly. First, let's get an overarching picture of the role of snakes and similar creatures in these creation myths. Snakes, or snake-like creatures, are often depicted in ancient Near Eastern art and literature as threats to the cosmic order. These agents of chaos, which oppose the cosmic order of the chief god, often take the form of snakes. In artistic depictions, the chaos dragon is almost always serpentine, with non-serpentine features like horns, arms, or wings occasionally added. Over time, the chaos dragons evolved to be less snake-like, but the original monsters were unmistakably serpentine. Perhaps the most well-known example of the serpent-like chaos monster comes from the Babylonian creation myth, the Enuma Elish. In this myth, the chaos monster Tiamat, along with many monsters she makes, is defeated by Marduk, the storm god and chief god of Babylon. There is some contention over how we should envision Tiamat's appearance, but there's general agreement that she was understood as a monstrous sea serpent, since she was associated with the bitter salt water. Also, she gives birth to 11 monsters who help her in her battle with Marduk, and several of these monsters are decidedly serpentine. They include the Mushushu, a monster who later became associated with Marduk. This same theme of a hero battling a serpentine sea monster can be seen in this seal from Tel Asmar in modern Iraq, where a hero is in the midst of a battle with a 7-headed sea serpent. You can tell by the 4 injured heads on the monster that our hero is doing quite well in his battle. And this 7-headed sea monster has a striking parallel in the Baal cycle, a collection of stories from the storm god about the storm god Baal. These stories were found at the coastal city of Ugarit in modern Syria and date to the Late Bronze Age. Here, the storm god Baal fights the water god Yam and his helpers, like the monster Lotan or Litan. The name of this monster means coiled, and is also given the epithet, the mighty one with 7 heads. This name Lotan is the same word we see in the Hebrew Bible as Leviathan. The Leviathan of the Hebrew Bible should be seen as a serpent-like chaos dragon, but other words in Hebrew like Rahab and Tanin are also used. Though sometimes, like with the word Tanin in Psalm 91, it can be ambiguous whether a sea monster or a regular snake is intended. Snakes in Mesopotamia could also be associated with specific physical dangers. This artifact depicts the demon Lamashtu. This demon was believed to afflict pregnant women and young children. She brought miscarriage and early labor, as well as jaundice in young children. She has dog-like features, but is holding snakes, perhaps because she's described as slithering into homes to attack, like a snake could. Other instances of serpents in Mesopotamian literature come from omen texts. These texts warn the reader about the meaning of particular events. If someone experiences one of these events, which is an omen, then a certain outcome is predicted to befall that person. Sometimes, however, there are ways to prevent that outcome from taking place. And there are many of these which concern snakes. This is such a common theme that we have a name for the practice of using snakes as omens, called ophiomancy. Studies of these omen texts show that snakes could be either positive or negative omens. Snakes were not considered intrinsically good or bad. The ambiguity of snake attributes is also seen in this Egyptian deity who is associated with snakes. This deity, Nehebkau, is a man with a snake head holding the Wajah eye. He was originally a malevolent force, but ultimately came to be seen as a judge in the afterlife. Another Egyptian god, Apophis, was seen as a thoroughly malevolent deity who sought to undo the established order of the cosmos.
Probably the most well-known appearance of a snake in the Bible is in Genesis 3, the serpent who tempted Eve to eat the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. This may recall a variation on the ancient Near Eastern scene of a chaos dragon attacking a sacred tree, which is a well-known image from ancient Near Eastern seals. This particular scene is probably not exactly what's going on in Genesis 3, but the general connection with snakes bringing disorder around a sacred tree is pretty close. In Genesis, the snake does not attack the sacred tree itself, but it leads human beings, representatives of God on earth, to defile the sacredness of the tree by eating its forbidden fruit. Even the name Eve, in Hebrew Hawa, meaning life, is very similar to an Aramaic word for snake. These two words may even share the same root. This scene in Genesis 3 demonstrates another common attribute of snake imagery: cunning and deception. In Genesis 3:1, the snake is described as more crafty than any beast of the field which the Lord God had made. Serpents can be dangerous. They are venomous, and they can hurt or even kill you if you're not careful. They often lie in wait before striking quickly. We can see why cunning and deception were so easily associated with snakes by ancient peoples. While snakes were associated with dangerous and potentially deadly cunning, they were also associated with wisdom. We see this in Jesus' instruction to be wise as serpents in Matthew 10:16. This association of snakes with wisdom goes back at least as far as ancient Egypt. where we see snakes referenced in several texts like the Pyramid texts, the Coffin texts, and the Book of the Dead. In the Pyramid and Coffin texts, there are spells and sayings meant to protect the dead from snakes, along with sayings from gods that had the form of snakes. For instance, in the Coffin texts, one serpent god says, "I extended everywhere in accordance with what was to come into existence. I knew as the one, alone, majestic, the indwelling soul, the most potent of the gods." In the earlier Pyramid texts, the primeval serpent says, "I am the overflow of the primeval flood, he who emerged from the waters. I am the provider of attributes, serpent with its many coils. I am the scribe of the divine book which says what has been and effects what is yet to be." One scholar summarizes saying it was from the center of the coils of this primeval serpent that the creative world was devised and the laws of the universe formulated. These primordial serpents who play a role in creation do so by virtue of their wisdom. They create or they cause things to come into existence, or they are the overflow of the primeval flood. And they do so by their knowing or by having some kind of special knowledge or wisdom. It's even reported that it was believed wearing part of a snake skin would make the wearer more cunning or shrewd. It's easy to see how the serpents who lie in wait, hiding within their surroundings, and attacking seemingly out of nowhere would be associated with cunning. And while this cunning can be seen as negative, the shrewd or wise side of that cunning is more positive. As we'll see in our next video, there are quite a few more positive associations with snakes in the ancient world. Thanks for joining us for this Beneath the Bible video. If you're interested in learning more about this topic, we've included some references and resources in the description below. Be sure to check out part 2 of this video next week, where we'll explore the positive dimensions of snake imagery in the ancient Near East. If you enjoyed this video and you want to see more content like it, be sure to give it a like, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and check out our website, beneaththebible.com. If you learned something new today, take a minute to share this video with your friends. And until next time, keep digging.